Dave Corzine was quoted as saying the following about the 83-84 NBA season for the Bulls. There wasn't one low point last season. It was one continuous low point. So good to see a bit of humour there from Dave. And the Bulls went 27-55 in the season prior to our NB85 breakdown.
The constant booing from the Bulls fans was undoubtedly causing Dave problems whilst playing at home.
I always like to say that Michael got to play with me for a year at North Carolina. I think it really helped him.
Spectacular player from the beginning.
You can see right away Jordan was going to be a big-time scorer.
And showed what an impact he was going to have on the league.
This is NB85, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Michael Jordan's rookie season in the NBA. And now, your hosts, Adam Ryan and Aaron Steen.
Welcome back, Aaron, to another episode of NB85. We're up to episode 14 of the series. It's flying by, mate. How are you today?
Very good, mate. I've moved from the confines of the Ford recording studios and actually allowed inside my own house to record this episode of NB85.
It's a step up, to say the least. If you're new to the show, thank you for joining us. If you're one of our regular listeners, welcome back. Just want to quickly mention, mate, before we get going in this episode, that with some regret, I'm going to have to cut back on the lengthy show notes that have accompanied the first 13 episodes of this NB85 series. As much as I love putting them together, they do take an absolute inordinate amount of time to actually prepare the content and curate everything as it appears on those posts. So I'm going to have to trim back on that considerably.
If the listeners enjoy this podcast series at all and want it to make it past the end of January, you'll just accept what Adam has just told you.
A little bit of inside info. I literally would spend 4, 5, 6 hours putting together every single blog post. By the time I crop all the images out, I find all the relevant bits and pieces and then put it together into a blog post. So that, on top of the audio editing side of things, makes it very time consuming. And as much as I love it, the only way that we will go past the All-Star break, as you just mentioned, for this 85 season is if I cut back considerably on the show notes. So we'll be referring to numerous articles and happenings as we always do going forwards, but there won't be as much information that will appear in the accompanying blog posts. The upside would be that our episodes will come out more frequently and in a more regular pattern, which will be a good thing for our listeners. Quick follow-up from last episode, mate. We chatted about Steve Snapper Jones, and we mentioned his commentating foray, but he had a very good career in the ABA, amassing almost 11,000 points. That was an oversight on my behalf there. I didn't actually go back into the history books enough via the Great Basketball Reference website and realise that Snapper was a very good player in the ABA. His ABA career began in the 67-68 season and finished in 1974-75. Played for numerous teams in the ABA, and then he had one season with the Portland Trailblazers in the NBA in the 75-76 season, the year prior to their championship season.
NBA News, Notes and Quotes, December 10th through 24, 1984.
The next 15-day block from the NBA's 39th season. I'm going to get straight into it, mate, with a trivia question for you and the listeners. Hope you're primed and ready to go.
Too bad if I'm not.
So that's hopefully why if I spring it on you now, you might stumble. Now, the question I wish to ask you, who attempted the most field goals in the 84-85 NBA season? A. Purvis Short. B. Dominique Human Highlight Film Wilkins. Or C. Alex English. Which of those three distinguished gentlemen had the most field goal attempts in the 84-85 NBA season?
I swear I looked at this exact stat about 3 days ago. Was it B, Dominique?
You are correct. Well done. Dominique Wilkins led the league with 1,891 field goal attempts. Alex English had 1,812. Purvis Short was next with 1,780. And rounding out the top five, we had Larry Legend with 1,760 and Michael Jeffrey Jordan in fifth place as a rook, throws up 1,625 shots.
That's my boy, Dominique, jacking up those shots.
Very efficient for the most part, all five of those gentlemen.
You look at Dominique's field goal percentage right throughout his career, and he shot under 50%. I think it was mainly around the other 45, 46% mark each season, which back then was actually quite poor. But now to shoot 46 or 48%, you'd be in the other top 20 or 30 in the league in field goal percentage.
Yeah, there's a bit of a contrast these days. So let's get into the episode itself, mate. On December the 11th, Boston were 130 to 121 winners over the New Jersey Nets in Hartford, Connecticut. And in this game, Otis Birdsong had 42 points for the Nets, and that included 13 consecutive field goals. So that's a fantastic effort in itself. It was Boston's 14th win in 15 games. Also on the same day, Bernard King of the New York Knicks returned from injury, and he scored 34 points as the Knicks ended Philadelphia's 7-game win streak. It also marked Hubie Brown's 300th win as a coach. The Chicago Bulls were defeated by the Detroit Pistons 108 to 101 at Chicago Stadium in front of 16,066 fans. The Bulls dropped to 13-10, and it ended their 5-game win streak. Detroit outscored Chicago 35 to 22 in the last quarter. And for the Bulls, Jordan had 27 points, 8 rebounds and 6 assists, so another great game from him. Orlando Woolridge had 23 points, and Caldwell Jones had a double-double, 10 points and 11 rebounds. For Detroit, they were led by Terry Tyler. He had a good season in 84-85. 26 points. The microwave, Vinnie Johnson, had 24. Isaiah Thomas, 22 and 9 assists, and Dan Roundfield had 21 points. And in this game, Kelly Tripucka had 2 points on 1 of 9 shooting. He'd missed the previous 8 games with a pulled right hamstring for the Pistons. And in this game, Jordan landed awkwardly after being fouled by Bill Laimbeer in the third quarter. However, he said after the game that he was fine.
On the day of the game, there was a Chicago Tribune article entitled "Pistons Won't Misfire Against Bulls." As you mentioned before, Kelly Tripucka was back for the game after missing 8 games with the pulled hamstring, and I find it quite surprising he had any hamstring problems, as I figured his skin-tight shorts would have provided plenty of support for that region.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. I always love a good Kelly Tripucka mention, and those outfits of the time were particularly tight.
The Bulls were out-rebounded 32 to 18 in the first half of this game, yet managed to only trail by the score of 53 to 50 at the half. After 3, they led 97 to 93 off 9 third-quarter points by Ennis Watley, who was really taking it to Isaiah, who was often sagging off Watley to double the Bulls' big men in the post. Chicago again had their troubles on the boards in the fourth quarter as the Pistons sent waves of rebounders, and eventually the Bulls lost the rebounding battle 57 to 36 with Bill Laimbeer of Detroit grabbing 23 himself. Caldwell Jones said that all 5 Bulls on the court were to blame, as the Pistons were sending all 5 of their players to crash the boards. The front court duo of Steve Johnson and David Greenwood combined for only 6 rebounds and 12 points, where Dan Roundfield and Terry Tyler of the Pistons combined for 47 points, and Roundfield also had 13 boards of his own. The Pistons started the fourth quarter on a 9-0 run and then had a 12-2 run with 5:30 remaining in the game that finished off Chicago.
They were clearly overwhelmed on the boards. The Bulls, I think you said they were out-rebounded by like 20 or more in that game, and Billy Laimbeer, his name will be mentioned a bit later on in this episode too, so there's no surprise there given he had 23 boards in this game.
Quite impressive for a white guy who couldn't jump to grab, well, first of all, 23 boards in this game, but he also had over 10,000 for his career as well.
Yeah, it did very well, Billy Laimbeer. Love him or hate him. Now, moving on, mate. On the 12th of December, Boston and Philadelphia had their first matchup since the infamous November 9 brawl, which we discussed in episode 8 of this series. And the Sixers won the game 110 to 107. Also on the same day, the New York Knicks advised that Bill Cartwright, former podcast guest, would miss the remainder of the season with a fractured foot. He was in episode 43 of the In All Earnest podcast, so feel free to check that out. Great conversation there with Big Billy Cartwright.
And 3-time Chicago Bull World Champion.
True that, mate, true that. 2 more stats from the 12th of November. 12th of November, 12th of December. Darryl Dawkins of the New Jersey Nets was released from hospital. He had been suffering with back problems. He'd been in there for a lazy 44 days. That's quite extraordinary. So fair to say that he would have been pleased to see the back of the hospital ward. No pun intended. I did not mean that, Darryl, if you're listening. Bulls setter Dave Corzine, in an article that I read on that same day, was quoted as saying the following about the 83-84 NBA season for the Bulls. He says, "There wasn't one low point last season. It was one continuous low point." So good to see a bit of humour there from Dave. And the Bulls went 27-55 in the season prior to our NB85 breakdown.
The constant booing from the Bulls fans was undoubtedly causing Dave problems whilst playing at home.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if you could see on the video, mate, but I had a coffee cup in my mouth and I was about to sip it. And then you looked like you were going to make some sort of pun. And I'm glad that I didn't take a sip because that would have been tragedy.
I'm talking away and I can see the coffee cup making its way towards your mouth and it was like a car accident. It's going to happen, but there's nothing you can do to stop it.
Oh, that could have been absolutely tragic. Straight over the microphone, the recorder. Whew, that could have been very nasty. Anyhow, crisis averted.
On December 12, the Chicago Tribune, they had this, I guess it's called a sports editorial, just a small segment in the sports section called Odds and Ends by Skip Mislinski and Linda Kay. A contribution from a faithful reader, Joe Schlestel of Bellington, Wisconsin. Hello to Joe if you're listening. Sorry if I butchered your name. Joe asked, "Is it true that the new Air Jordan line of gym shoes, soon to be introduced by Nike, will feature extra long tongues?"
He's no average Joe, this bloke. Good stuff, mate. I love finding this sort of random minutiae, which is one of my favourite words, of course. If you look at show notes and previous episodes, we have to make mention of this sort of stuff. You can't even make it up. No. Now, on December the 12th, the Bulls and Pistons had a rematch. It was a home-and-home series, and this time the Pistons, again, were winners 102-95, but this time the game was played at Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan in front of 14,016 fans. The Bulls' record dropped to 13-11. In the game for the Bulls, MJ had 21 points, Orlando Woolridge 19 points and 6 rebounds. The quintessential gunner, Quentin Daly, had 16 points, and Corwell Jones had 7 boards. For the Pistons, Zeke had 23 points and 13 assists. The Microwave had 16 points, 4 boards and 4 assists, and Kelly Tripucka, 14 points and 4 rebounds. So he was back to some form there after the misstep in the previous game.
Orlando missed a fast break opportunity, which would have tied the game with less than 2 minutes to go. The score was tied at 47 at the half, and then Detroit pulled out to a 79-66 lead in the third term before a comeback from what the Tribune called a small Bulls lineup of Woolridge, Greenwood, Higgins, Jordan, and Daly, which to me sounds like a big lineup.
Yeah, it's a decent size.
An 11-2 Bulls run had Chicago ahead 89-87 with 5 minutes left in the game, but they failed to convert several chances down the stretch, which left Isaiah to control the game at both ends. Jordan and Woolridge shot a combined 14 for 36 from the field in this game.
Yeah, that's not going to get it done. And one of the things that I've noticed already in this early season that we're chatting about is that the Bulls were in a lot of games in this season, and yet they continually found ways to just stumble through inexperience mostly and lack of, I guess, veteran leadership.
Which is something that I elaborate on a little bit later on.
Good to hear, mate. I'm glad that we're thinking the same there. Let's have a look at other happenings from December the 12th. Houston were 96-93 winners against the Atlanta Hawks. Kevin Willis was ejected for hitting Ralph Sampson with an open hand. Sampson responded with a left jab, but only Kevin Wilson in Australia.
Bloody hell.
Great stuff. I love the Freudian slips, and I'll keep that one in there because that's funny for Australian listeners. There's a comedian called Kevin Bloody Wilson. Anyhow, Kevin Willis was ejected, and Ralph Sampson got to stay in the game. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on the same date here scored 15 points in the Lakers' 131-107 home victory against the Golden State Warriors. He became the first player in NBA history to surpass 32,000 points, which I think is one of the best stats that we've come across thus far in the early 84-85 season. In an unrelated, yet almost as startling a statistic from the same game, Warriors rookie, now I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Peter Thibault, he played 93 total games in the NBA. Most notable is that he scored all 22 points in the game in the fourth quarter of this game against the Lakers. So that was quite remarkable.
That's a cracker. 22 points in one quarter.
Yeah, and it's from a rookie who only played 90, well, only, I mean, to make the NBA, you're a gun to start with, to only play 93 total games in the NBA. And another little quirk about his career, after I went to the greatbasketballreference.com website, is that he scored 231 points in each of his 2 NBA seasons. So make of that what you will. Let's have a look. December 14, the Dr. Julius Erving from Philadelphia scored 32 points, and that was his second highest scoring game of the 85 season in the Sixers' 115-111 win at Milwaukee. That stopped a 10-game home winning streak for the Milwaukee Bucks.
On this day in the Chicago Tribune, there was an article entitled Bulls Still Want Rollins. The article was, of course, about the Bulls' pursuit of Tree Rollins of the Atlanta Hawks at the time. After the previous Pistons game, Isaiah Thomas said, "Michael is a real nice guy. He's got such a pretty jump shot. He really is a great guy, and I like him." Talk about trying to sweet talk a guy into liking you so you can rip his throat out on the court.
And I find it really interesting sort of stuff and these sort of quotes because we're only a couple of months away from what would be the infamous freeze-out game at the 1985 All-Star Game, which we will chat about in this series and also probably turn into a full episode of the In All Airness podcast as well. We'll have to just work extra time there, mate, to do one of those episodes. But their relationship really changed over the years and it gradually got worse as the years went on, which is really understating things. So we'll chat about that more in future episodes. In the same day's paper, in the odds and ins section, there's an interesting little tidbit which said Mickey D and Michael J. Don't be surprised to see Michael Jordan linking arms with Ronald McDonald under the Golden Arches soon. It refers to MJ being a McDonald's High School All-American, McDonald's links to the 84 Olympics, and how Macca's was also based in Chicago. Plus, the absolute kicker was the fact that they said that MJ is, and in quotes, a regular customer of McDonald's.
Do they call McDonald's Macca's in the article, or is that yours?
No, I refer to it as Macca's, which I think it's probably known colloquially here in Australia. Not sure about overseas. I think it's Mickey D's in the US, isn't it?
At least.
Yeah, not sure. December 14 as well. The New Jersey Nets took on the Chicago Bulls, and again, it was another tough loss for Chicago. The Nets hung on to win 111-109 at Brendan Byrne Arena in the Meadowlands, New Jersey, in front of just over 14,000 people, 14,091 to be precise. The Bulls dropped to 13-12, so they always seem to be hovering around the 500 mark. In this game, MJ had another absolute blinder, 34 points, 8 rebounds and 8 assists. Orlando Woolridge had 22 points and Quentin Daly had 21. For New Jersey Nets, Otis Birdsong had 24 points, 8 rebounds and 5 assists. Michael Ray Richardson, good to hear his name, had 18 points and 11 assists. And Buck Williams, 18 points, and Mike Jaminski, a good double-double, 16 points and 11 boards. New Jersey's Jeff Turner, who was also a teammate of MJ's at the 84 Olympics, kneed MJ in the back during the said game, which caused MJ a few problems in the following days, and we'll get to that a bit later on in this episode too.
New Jersey dressed only 8 players for this game in what was called a depressing loss in the Tribune. Kevin Lockery said that they were absolutely horrible in every fashion, which is quite damning. Little U's Jawan Oldham provide a spark off the bench in this game. After averaging 6 minutes per game, he reeled off 19 straight minutes at one point in time. During this span, he contributed 8 points, 6 rebounds, 3 dunks off offensive boards, and a block shot. He even had a play drawn up for him late in the game.
Oh, he did have a play drawn up for him. Oh, okay.
He did. The Nets ran up a 19-point lead during the second quarter, and Lockery was desperately making substitutions throughout as nothing seemed to work. The Nets scored 37 points in the first term of this game, and with just under 7 minutes to play in the game, led 99-86. The Bulls went on a 15-2 run and tied the game at 101 on a quintessential Daly jumper. They were down 2 in the last 30 seconds and missed 3 opportunities to again tie the game.
On December 15, the Philadelphia 76ers took on the Chicago Bulls and again had a victory. It was at Chicago Stadium, 114-102 over the Bulls, and there was 16,261 in attendance. The Bulls' record went to 13-13, so they were on even 500. For Chicago, Orlando Woolridge had a great game, 30 points and 5 rebounds. Jordan was held to just 14 points, which was his second lowest total in the 85 season, and he only had 2 rebounds and 2 assists. Quentin Daly had 21 points, and Jawan Oldham had 8 rebounds, so he was certainly on the improve and getting more playing time from Kevin Lockery. For Philadelphia, Moses Malone had 28 points and 12 boards. Thanks very much, Moses. Dr. J had 21 points. Andrew Toney had 20 points, and the round mound of rebound, Charles Barkley, had 15 points and 14 rebounds, so that was a pretty impressive game there from Charles. It was the Bulls' 4th straight loss, and there's a nice little quote during one of the articles talking about this game, which says, Jordan walked with the gait of a nursing home veteran afterwards in the locker room. Then MJ was quoted as saying, I want to be back to my Air Jordan self on Tuesday, referencing a matchup with Houston's Twin Towers, and great to see MJ talking about himself in the third person. Adam really enjoyed that.
On December 15, the Tribune had an article which listed the game on Wind AM radio on a delayed broadcast after the Chicago Blackhawks game.
Yeah, not good for the Chicago Bulls fans to have to endure that. I guess Wind is, I suppose, in relation to Windy City, I guess. I'm not sure. Wind AM. I'd love to get some of those early 85 season games from the radio broadcast. Imagine hearing copies of those. That'd be fantastic.
Are you aware of who was on Bulls radio at that point in time?
No, I actually don't know.
The day after this game, the Tribune wrote that the Bulls look good, but the 76ers look better. The article said that there was a lot to like about the Bulls against the Sixers. Oldham continued his intimidating play inside with 8 rebounds and 4 blocks. Orlando scored 30 points on 14 for 20 shooting. And the newly anointed bomb squad, aka the Bulls bench, ignited the team again. They simply couldn't make it last after taking it to Philly throughout the game, but then letting the Sixers score the last 12 points of the game to take the 114-102 win in Chicago. It was said that MJ's back issues limited him from driving the ball to the rim, and he was even unable to crouch low on D. Such was the limitation from his sore back. The bomb squad had cut the Sixer lead to 2 at the half. The article stated that Oldham and Greenwood hit the boards, Matthews hit the open man, and Daly hit the shots. Rod Higgins did everything in between. The lead changed 8 times in the first 3 minutes of the fourth before Philly took over late.
Another instance of the Bulls being right in the game until the closing moments and then just giving it up a bit too late and taking the L. Now, Orlando Woolridge on the 17th of December, on one of the off days of the Bulls, visited a dentist to be fitted with a protective mouthpiece after being smacked in the gob the week prior.
And for our US listeners, when Adam says the word smacked in the gob, it's smacked in the mouth.
That's right. I forgot about that. I have to make mention of some of the vernacular that we have over here. On the 18th of December, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar hit 2 skyhooks in the last 9 seconds to secure the Lakers a 117-116 win at Atlanta. The Magic Man had 25 points, 14 rebounds, and 20 assists.
What a stat line.
Yeah, incredible. James Worthy and Byron Scott had 20 points apiece for the Lake Show. For Atlanta, Glenn Doc Rivers had 25 points, and the Human Highlight Film had 20 points of his own. Also on the 18th, Gene Shue celebrated his 53rd birthday and enjoyed his 700th victory as coach in Washington's 104-95 home win versus the New Jersey Nets.
You might like to say that as a coach, Gene Shu was a good fit.
That actually took him to 700 and 700 in his win-loss record. So 700 victories, fantastic, but 700 losses for Shu would be soul-destroying. Anyhow, moving on. Also on this same day, on the 18th of December, the Houston Rockets were 104-96 winners over the Bulls at Chicago Stadium in front of a very healthy crowd of 18,543. This was the fifth straight loss for the Bulls, and they dipped to under 500 on the season, 13-14.
Olajuwon came into this game at Chicago Stadium off a stretch of games in which he was shooting 63% from the field, so he was in good touch.
Yeah, fair to say he was in pretty good form there. For the Bulls, Orlando Woolridge had another stellar performance, 28 points and 12 rebounds. Ennis Watley had a really good game for the Bulls, 8 points, 11 assists and 2 steals. MJ had 18 points and 8 assists. Quentin Daly had 16 points, and for the Rockets, Olajuwon went for 24 and 10 boards. Rodney McRae, future Chicago Bull, had 20 points and 10 rebounds.
World champion.
And Ralph Sampson had 16 points and 11 rebounds. Now, McRae was with the Bulls in the 1993 NBA season. This was the first meeting between Olajuwon and Jordan, and MJ required 3 stitches to his left eyelid after the game. And as I mentioned, 5-game losing streak for the Bulls, and that was their worst losing streak of the 84-85 season.
On the 19th, the Tribune had an article entitled "Sinking Feeling Hits Bulls Fans." The Rockets scored the last 11 points in 2 minutes to get the 104-96 win in this game. The article spoke of the Bulls as being exciting, spontaneous, and a treat to watch for 46 minutes. But when it comes to crunch time, the Bulls execute a slow fade and had done just this in several games so far this year. The article asked Steve Johnson, who was actually on the bench down the stretch of this game, why they aren't going inside more down the stretch of games. He said that the coaches have confidence in 3 guys, being Jordan, Orlando, and Daly, and it's up to the rest of them to establish themselves. Of the Bulls' 7-2 start to the season, Johnson said, "I remember Orlando and Michael were shooting out of their minds. Michael was taking people straight to the hole every time, but I guess they just simply weren't making those same plays at this point of the season." The Bulls peeled off a 26-10 start in this game off the back of some great play by Ennis Watley.
I'm quite stunned at the fact that the Rockets scored the last 11 points of the game to win by 8. So the Bulls actually were up by 3. My maths is impeccable. And yet they just watched the lead slip away and the Rockets get the win.
And you look at the previous game when the 76ers ran off the last 12 points of that game. The game was actually tied before that happened. So the Bulls were completely dropping the ball down the stretch of games.
Yep. Also on the 19th of December, Milwaukee handed Boston their first home loss of the season in a 107-92 victory at the Boston Garden. Terry Cummings scored 10 points of his game-high 29 in the fourth quarter. And for what it's worth, TC is a former podcast guest as well. On the 19th, also, Detroit Pistons visited the Denver Nuggets in a rematch of the previous season's all-time high-scoring game for the most points in an NBA contest, which was December 13 of 1983. It was another high-scoring affair. This time the Pistons were 148-129 victors. John Long for the Pistons was the game's high man with 26 points. For Denver, Wayne Cooper scored 20 points, and Alex English was hanging with Mr. Cooper and scored 14 points and 7 assists.
Isn't that amazing? John Long was the high man with 26, and for Denver, Wayne Cooper had 20 and Alex English had 14, and the score was 148-129.
Yeah, I think there was multiple double-digit scorers for both teams, but yeah, pretty crazy scoreline, and it wasn't even OT.
On December 20, Kevin Lockery spoke of 3 unnamed players who were starters in the 83-84 season who weren't playing well and mysteriously weren't returning to form for the Bulls. The article said, "You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure that the 3 guys whose reduction in playing time were Watley, Greenwood, and poor old Dave Corzine."
You had to pause there for a moment to make sure that it really was Dave Corzine. Surely not.
Greenwood may have been still getting out the kinks after his holdout. Watley still working out his role as a facilitator or a scorer, and poor old Dave Corzine was dealing with his own performances and the psychological beating he takes from the constant booing of stadium fans.
Oh, poor Dave.
Kevin Lockery continued to say, "It's time to put up or shut up." The Bulls remembered what shutting up was like the previous season, playing in the dead of winter in front of 4,000 stadium customers.
Oh, that's not great. Also on the 20th of December, the Bulls actually had a game as well. They were in a 2-overtime epic against the Atlanta Hawks at New Orleans, Louisiana, which we'll get to in a moment, in front of a staggering 5,647 fans. The Bulls returned to a 500 record and they were 14-14. They were 132-129 winners in 2 OT against the Hawks. For Chicago, MJ had a great game, 34 points, 8 rebounds and 7 assists. Steve Johnson had 27 points and 16 rebounds as well. What a phenomenal effort from him. Quentin Daly had 26 points and 8 assists, which is another great effort there from Q. And for the Hawks, Doc Rivers had 30 points and 14 assists. And Dominique had 26 points and 7 rebounds.
Doc Rivers really had some monster games, didn't he, in both the scoring and assist columns. The following day, the Tribune wrote, "Bulls break losing drought, slump ended in 2 OTs." This was one of Atlanta's 12-game home-away-from-home series in front of 5,647 fans at the University of New Orleans. Wes Matthews hit a 3 with 3 seconds remaining in the first overtime to tie the score. Matthews hit the 3 after his man doubled MJ, leaving him wide open. The second OT was led by a barrage of clutch shots by Jordan and Watley, which unnerved the Hawks and gave the Bulls the 132-129 win. Probably the most incredible part of this article was, with 4 seconds left, Jordan missed a jump shot. Dominic Wilkins rebounded and raced up court only to have Dave Corzine disrupt his drive at half court. Neek at full speed and Corzine disrupts him.
Awesome play there by Dave Corzine, obviously.
It was a timely win for Chicago as the defending champ Celtics were up next at Chicago Stadium. MJ scored his 34 with back problems throughout the game, which had been hampering him in games leading up to this one due to that knee in the back from Jeff Turner. In the first overtime, Doc Rivers fouled out after his best game as a pro. He had 30 points and 14 assists in his second season, and his absence let Daly and MJ go to work. The slower Randy Whitman was left to guard MJ, and Sidney Lowe at 6 feet was left guarding the 6'4" Daly, to which the accompanying article had the call of the episode with, "So one guard was too slow and the other too low."
Oh, that's great that it's included that, because when you said Lowe was smaller than Daly, I was about to go very similar as well. So I'm glad that you plucked that part out of the article there, mate.
Steve Johnson also played his best game of the season with 27 and 16 after sitting down the stretch versus Houston. It was revealed that Steve Johnson's secret was using techniques of positive thinking that he had learned at a seminar over the offseason.
Oh, that's a good little tidbit too, mate. Coming through some great stuff there. On the same day, Kevin McHale's streak of 413 consecutive games would come to an end. He'd missed 2 games, including one that we'll talk about shortly, with torn left ankle ligaments. That was worth mentioning because it was a fantastic streak since he came into the league in his first 5 seasons, hadn't missed a game. Also on the same day, Sidney Moncrief hit for an equal season high of 35 points in Milwaukee's 3-point win, 104-101 at Philadelphia. It also snapped a 4-game win streak for Philadelphia, and Terry Cummings had 26 points, and Paul Pressey, one of those great 1980s players which is oft overlooked, chimed in with 9 rebounds and 13 assists in the Bucks win.
It's nice, though, to see in 2015 that Paul Pressey is able to get a bit of a mention with his son currently playing for the Boston Celtics.
Didn't even realise he was, mate, so there you go. Obviously, I'm not really in tune with the 2014-15 Boston Celtics. Now, on December 22, Julius Erving scored 20 points and he passed the 15,000 career point mark in the 76ers' 107-93 victory over New Jersey at Philadelphia. The same day as well, Chicago had a resounding victory over the Boston Celtics at Chicago Stadium in front of 14,414 people. It was a 110-85 shellacking, and the Bulls went to 15-14 on the season. MJ had a phenomenal game. I don't like to use phenomenal too many times, maybe 13 or 14 times an episode. He had 32 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. Orlando Woolridge went for 21, and Steve Johnson had 18 points for the Bulls. For the Celtics, Danny Ainge was the leading scorer with just 16 points. Scott Wedman had 14, Cedric Cornbread Maxwell 11, Larry Bird had just 10 points, and Robert the Chief Parrish, which he's never been called in that order, had 8 points and 11 rebounds. This was Boston's worst loss in 2 years, and after this game, Chicago had 4 days off.
Two immediate thoughts are, how can you not mention Cedric Maxwell's name and not mention his nickname Cornbread?
Yep.
And secondly, is it just me, or does every game that the Bulls play seem to be against the Celtics or the 76ers?
Yeah, they played each other a lot in the early season, and they also played the Bucks quite a bit too. So
it's true. On this game, Bob Sakamoto of the Chicago Tribune wrote an article entitled "Bulls Show Celtics Their Best." On the page in the Tribune that this story was shown, the Bulls, who had just won one of their last 6 games, had just beaten the defending world champions, and even the main photo on this page of the story was from the DePaul Northwestern game from the night before. No love for the Bulls. There were no brave words, predictions, or challenges from the Bulls before this game. They learned their lesson after poking the bear before the champs came into Chicago and smacked the Bulls 125-105 on the 15th of November. Boston played this game shorthanded without DJ and Kevin McHale, both with sprained ankles. Steve Johnson was again key in this game with a very strong second quarter, leading to the 52-37 halftime lead for Chicago. MJ had 20.6 rebounds and 5 assists at the half, accompanied by Steve Johnson's 16 and 10 for Orlando. Nobody was in double figures for the Celtics at the half. MJ electrified the crowd with a one-handed reverse jam in the third quarter, giving them a 74-51 lead as the Bulls continued their hot shooting. MJ had 12 for the quarter, giving him 32 after 3 quarters. He checked out of the game to a standing O with 9:40 remaining in the fourth quarter. A Quinton Daly jumper with 4:25 to go gave them their largest lead of 32 points at 104-72. The following day, the Tribune wrote about Wes Matthews in an article titled "Matthews Makes the Point." 6'1" guard races his engine, revs up the Bulls. It was a nice little piece about the Bulls being unbeaten when Wes Matthews has started in the place of Ennis Watley, albeit it was only a 2-0 record.
Small sample size, but still a good point. December 23rd, there was a newspaper article which noted that Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins were named Sportsmen of the Year by the governing body of amateur basketball in the United States, and it mentioned how they were co-captains on the 84 US Olympic team. So that was a little tidbit there. And a random stat from this span of time that we're chatting about, mate, on December 17 and 24, there were no games on the NBA schedule.
And it's at this point where I've realised that I've almost forgotten to give you your trivia question, so here it is.
I wasn't going to mention it because I'm concerned I'm not going to get it right. Anyhow, go ahead.
This 84-85 rookie retired in 2001 as the last remaining member of the Kansas City Kings. Who am I?
I was expecting multiple choice, and now you've thrown me completely. So 16 years in the league.
Yep.
2001 retired.
Retired as a member of the Charlotte Hornets, but of course, most well known as a member of the Houston Rockets.
Oh, okay. It's Otis Thorpe.
Otis Thorpe.
Yeah, you gave it away though, unfortunately. But I was ST Ruggling and then some. I was thinking Lascelles Thompson, but I think he was even a couple of years prior to the 84 draft, so he didn't play beyond the late 90s. So.
For this period of time we're talking about, the 2 Player of the Week awards for the week of December 16 went to Derek Smith of the LA Clippers. He averaged more than 22 points and shot over 50% from the field. The Clippers were in the midst of a 6-game win streak. And for December 23, Terry Cummings of Milwaukee had a pretty decent week, averaging 28.4 points on almost 60% from the field. During this week, the Bucks had 5 straight wins on their way to 9 consecutive in the win total.
In terms of our individual highs over this period of time, mate, in the points column, Bernard King had 43 points for the New York Knicks at Washington on the 21st of December. He scored 16 of those 43 in the third quarter as the Knicks still lost by 14 points, 125 to 111. Honourable mention goes to Otis Birdsong of New Jersey and Adrian Dantley of Detroit, who scored 42 points each. Birdsong against the Boston Celtics on the 11th of December and Dantley against the Milwaukee Bucks on the 16th of December. Bill Laimbeer, as we mentioned early in the episode, was the leading rebounder with 23 in a single game on the 11th of December for the Pistons against the Bulls, and Isaiah Thomas dished out 21 dimes against the Kansas City Kings on the 22nd of December. A quick look at the NBA standings through Christmas Eve 1984. The division leaders in the Atlantic, the Boston Celtics, were 23-5. In the Central, the Milwaukee Bucks were 19-11. In the Midwest, the Nuggets and Rockets were tied at 17-11. In the Pacific Division, the Lakers were 19-10. Now, for this period of time we've covered, the Bulls went a lowly 2-5, and the Cavs were the league's cellar dwellers with 5-20. Last episode, I think I referred to them as being absolutely shocking, but they improved a little bit in the next period of time, which we'll get to in a future episode. Now, Aaron, that brings an end to today's episode. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we round this one out?
It's quite extraordinary that Kevin McHale had a streak of 413 consecutive giddy-ups.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.